From Screen to Shelf.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of From Screen to Shelf. My name is Will. I am joined by Gabe and Chase. We are back from a short hiatus. We took a week off after Thanksgiving to replenish ourselves and recover from our hangovers, our turkey hangovers. So
carb comas.
Yeah, carb comas. We're here today to discuss we're awake somewhat, slowly getting there. But we're going to discuss the state of cinema. We're going to talk about movie theaters and whether or not they're ever going to make a comeback after COVID, after the effects of streaming kind of taking place now over the course of the last, I guess we could say 2 or 3 years, right, since COVID. So,
yeah.
And whether or not a lot of these big studios can kind of recover from this kind of rut that they're in right now with major releases just not performing up to par like they were before COVID. So we're going to get right into it here, and we're going to talk about all the big movies that have come out recently. Indiana Jones, Napoleon, Wish, I believe, Chase. We're going to start off with that. But we're going to get into it right here. I'm going to hand it over to Chase. He's going to get us started here. So Chase, let's open it up.
Yeah, I want to open it up with like the biggest topic that's on pretty much everybody's mind right now because it's the freshest example, right? Of course, we have more we're going to talk about, but Pixar hardly fails. You know, it's a tried and true formula whenever it comes to Pixar. You can always count on their artistic expression, a good story. And I think that's probably where, to segue with what we're talking about with Wish, where they're falling. So I personally, Gabe, Will, I don't think either of you guys went and saw Wish, or unless you guys went to the midnight premiere.
I went like first screening, bro. What are you talking about?
So yeah, like you can always count on, except this time, and there's been a couple examples. I want to say Strange Worlds was another one by Pixar that kind of bombed, but that was like kind of the first little, whoa, what's going on for them? On a $175 to $200 million estimated budget for Wish, which is a newer Pixar film that just came out November 8th, or November 22nd, I apologize. That was the premiere, was November 8th. On November 22nd, so it's had about 2 weeks going into its theatrical run, about a week and a half approaching steadily. Currently, as of filming, it is sitting at a global box office of $81.6 million. And
oof.
Yeah, that is rough. That is mega rough. So to talk about that and to segue into the state of cinema and why, of course, it's not all doom and gloom. Let's preface that real quick, because you had Avatar, you had Top Gun Maverick, which a lot of people, you know, it's a constantly evolving type of conversation. But just because 1 or 2 movies out of hundreds do well doesn't change the potential steadfast approach that people prefer possibly streaming and watching their films at home rather than going to the theaters, right? So the problem that we're hearing based on some certain reviews and some user review comments on Metacritic is that it's extremely generic, right? They're kind of counting on this tried and true formula that they feel like would get butts in seats and stuff like that. But the thing is things have to evolve. People, our taste, everything evolve. Horror is a good example. You know, the dark ages of horror wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things. The 2000s was a dark period for horror. Now horror's had a big resurgence with things like Hereditary, Scream coming back, The Witch, things like that. Midsummer, like the banner right behind me, right? So like there's been a huge increase in what people like and a huge evolution, right? It changes yearly. It changes every decade, every 5 years. So whenever you talk about things like Wish, whenever it's Pixar, and it's pretty much guaranteed to get them about 500 to 600 million, especially since they had that grandiose taste of success with Frozen 1. I don't know if Frozen 2 did the same numbers, but I remember everybody talking about it as well, right? But it kind of leads me into a talk track about cinema as well, where it comes into, and you can even talk about the Marvel fatigue episode that we did as well, where it talks about what is going on and do these people really know what we want, right? Moana came out not too long ago, and that was a huge success for them. And Kanto, as far as I was aware, was not a box office success, but it was a streaming success per Bob Iger with what he said. The biggest thing, and I feel like where there might be out of touch with the audience, we don't want mediocrity with what's being reported about Wish, right? And then also, Frozen's not that old. Moana's not that old. Why has there already been live action adaptations of both of those films already announced? You know what I mean? That's not getting really anybody.
I didn't even
excited.
know that.
You didn't
I didn't even
that?
know that, and that is, I feel like that's way too soon.
insane.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's insane.
Like a lot of comments I was reading, a lot of things on the Discord whenever that was coming up. One of the best talk tracks I heard about that was Snow White, Cinderella. All of those make sense because those are things that multiple generations have grown up with, right? 2 or 3 different generations have grown up watching it. It's embedded in our memories. We watched it a lot as kids. And that's what Disney was known for. But they aren't necessarily putting out things outside of Moana. Coco, I heard great things about. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go see it. Soul looks amazing, and that's on my list of things to watch. But that doesn't necessarily mean these things are going to stand the test of time as much as they were a product of the time that they were released, right? So when it comes to Wish, there's really not much else I can say. I didn't go see it. I know people that went and saw it, and nobody has anything other than potential 5.5 out of 10 type of comments to say. It's average. It's mediocre at best. It doesn't take risks. It doesn't do anything new. It doesn't do anything fun. You get in there and you get exactly what you expect, a Disney Pixar movie, you know?
Yeah.
That's not exciting, and the numbers can show, right? On an $81.6 million box office performance against a $200 million budget, the general rule of thumb, Gabe, Will, we were talking about this before we rolled, you need to make double, most likely triple of that to actually start making gross profit, right? So that means when they made this movie, that they were expecting it to do north of $600 million, right? They were banking on this being a huge success.
Yeah, just to start making money, 600 million just to start making money. 600 million is like the threshold to start making profit.
Yeah, and that's wild. So then the thing is on this right here at 81.6, it starts posing the question, how much money do these people have to lose before they start getting in touch with the audiences, right? Bob Iger recently came out and made a comment and said that not enough executives are on set or overseeing it, or they're trying to be too broad with their storytelling, trying to be too inclusive. Well, there's a lot of problems with that loaded statement, you know? One, Disney's always been known for taking risks, being inclusive, you know, drawing in audiences, Black Panther, for example, targeting different demographics whenever it comes to like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, targeting demographics. As far as I'm aware, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was kind of one of those things to get everybody involved into it, all shapes and sizes of people, right? It was kind of like their message, you know, the Seven Dwarfs, right? And then you have like love stories like Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, which is about appearances and stuff like that. You know, you love who you love, not what you see, right? Just stuff like that. So that is such a out of touch statement, right? And to especially say that about the Marvels, when in reality, it's just, you haven't done anything exciting, right? And I'll let one of you guys segue into like Killers of the Flower Moon and the more broader cinema aspect. I just really wanted to touch base on that because I find that pretty wild that a Pixar movie is going to bomb this hard. That is crazy. That is crazy.
Well, can I ask you a question? Do we know if Wish is that set for streaming or is that only theatrical right now? I'm just curious.
So it's not. It's definitely gonna come out on streaming. You know, the D+. It comes out a couple weeks before the physical media release. All of that, right? But this isn't one of those ones like Killers of the Flower Moon and Napoleon, which I'm sure we'll touch on here very soon, where like those are Apple originals that got a theatrical run to help bolster sales, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And those are underperforming, and I feel like for good reason, because people know that they can see it at home, right? People know they can see this at home, and maybe that's why it's hurting it as well, because you have Disney Plus. I mean, that's a great question to pose.
It's
Even
February, by the way. I just looked it up.
Oh, when this one's going to come out on streaming?
Yeah,
it's gonna
February 7th.
That's a lot of time. So absolutely, that's unappealing, you know?
But I mean, to be honest though, I mean, that's not like what it used to be, right? Where, I mean, when we just had theatrical releases and then we'd wait for the physical release, sometimes that was like 6 to 8 months, like back in the day, like, you know what I mean? So like 2 months mentally for people, that's nothing. That's like, oh, we'll just wait for February to come and we'll watch it on streaming.
Yeah. Because there's always things coming out. There's going to be something else to bide your time. You know, whatever came out 2 months ago, to your point, is coming out now. I'm going to watch that instead.
Yeah. And I think that Disney doesn't. I think the problem with Disney is, I mean, kind of like what you mentioned, Chase, with Iger's statements. I think they're really just not in touch with what people are wanting. I think that they've kind of relied on the same formula. Like, you know, I think what made Pixar so innovative was not, I mean, obviously the animation at the time, that was really innovative, but like with Toy Story and all that. But I think it was the stories they were telling. They were like really unique stories and people were really invested in those stories. And now Disney, instead of looking at it as like we were telling good stories, they were like, oh, it's because it's an animated movie. Like, just throw money at an animated budget. It's a Pixar movie. People are going to go see it just because it's a Pixar movie. And that's not the case anymore. Like, Pixar has really, it's just kind of like, I know what to expect with a Pixar movie now. It's not anything that surprises me. Don't get me wrong. There are some here and there that I think still really do well and they still shine. What was that one with the feelings, with the 4 different feelings in the
Inside Out?
The girls Inside Out. I loved Inside Out. I thought that was a great movie. But I mean, they're starting to become just kind of this like repetitive, thematic kind of thing. Like it's I know what to expect, and I think that's where Disney's losing touch. Is they just kind of look at it as like, let's throw money at a Pixar budget and we'll make that money back. But people are tired, kind of like what we talked about with the Marvel fatigue or superhero fatigue. I know we had a kind of like discussion or debate about that, but I think people are tired of just the same old stories, just the same old, like, I don't know what it's about. I'm assuming it's probably about some princess that, everyone doubts her, and then and then she overcomes, and it's just, what you're getting into.
Yep.
And I think that's boring. I think people are tired of it. And why not wait for streaming? You're already paying $10 a month for Disney Plus. Why not wait for it to come out in 2 months? But I know we could use that to kind of segue into all these other movies. I think streaming and the way these studios have utilized streaming, that's one of the biggest problems, is they're putting these releases, and I honestly do blame Warner Brothers a lot for this, with the whole HBO debacle that happened when COVID hit, where Will and I were talking about this earlier, where I don't remember all the movies they did this with. I know like Matrix 4, that came out the same day. Like you had, I think maybe Suicide Squad 2 that came out the same day. Dune, I think it was like maybe like, what was it? They said like in a week or two that they would release it afterwards.
That was the one.
But it was like 2 weeks. It was, I mean, it wasn't anything it wasn't long. So it's like, why would people go to the movie theater to go? I mean, we want to see it theatrically just because we're obviously in the very small minority where we're like, we love cinema, we love film, we love the theatrical experience, but a lot of people don't care about that.
No.
They just want to see the movie. So why would you release a movie the same day or within 2 weeks? And when you've done that repetitively, because I think Warner Brothers did it for a whole year, if I remember correctly.
365
They had announced
days
so they were going to do it for 12 months. So as soon as you did that, you've already set a precedent that people have already kind of acclimated to and adjusted to. So now it's like, well, screw it. Now I could just watch all my movies within a week or two of theatrical release. Why go? And also with kind of a lot of the socioeconomic stuff that's been happening the past 3 years, it's expensive to go to the movie theater.
Oh,
I mean, the popcorn, the tickets, that, like, especially if you have kids, I mean, you're spending north of 50, 60, 70 bucks just to go to the movie theater when you can pay $10 to watch it on streaming. So that's going to turn people, it's going to turn people away. So I think it's really set this kind of bad precedent. I mean, there's so many different variables involved, but I think, at least for me, that was definitely the turning point with Warner Brothers and HBO Max and the way they started releasing those films. And I think other studios took, I don't know why, they took a similar approach. I think Disney started doing it with, I think, didn't Scarlett Johansson get into a legal battle with Disney? Black Widow, right? Because
Black Widow.
Because of, it was released on streaming and it took away from the box office returns, which she was supposed to get a percentage of. So I'm like, why would you do that?
Yeah, you just hurt your stars.
Yeah.
You hurt your stars, but you also, I mean, to me, I don't know the socioeconomic or the economics, of streaming. Like you can't be making more off of the stream than the theatrical release, at least for something like Black Widow. Because to me, Black Widow, everyone knows Black Widow, everyone knows Scarlett Johansson. People are going to go see that theatrically. But as soon as you say, hey, we're going to have it in 2 weeks, why go to the movie theater at that point?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point.
Crazy to me.
Like, just think about it. Like, because that's actually what I was holding on to say. And because you just triggered a thought, it's like, that's my thing. Like, I mean, of course, it's just me. So if I go to the movies, like whenever I go see Godzilla, it's $9.74 for the matinee, right?
Mhm.
But depending on the day, it can be as much as $17 to $18, right?
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Especially for like an AMC. And then let's say I get hungry, I get thirsty. You're looking at $40 just for me to go out, as little as $30 if I just pay $10 for the ticket. But like you said, you know, the couple with a potential 2 kids, 1 to 2 kids, or even bigger, right? And you're going to go out there and see that. That's $100 to $200 outing because your kids are going to want to see the candy in there, and that candy's overpriced out the wazoo. It's like,
well, that's why you bring the food in yourself, man. What are you talking about?
So like
Sneak
it
it
just
in, bro.
adds up. Yeah. And so, yeah, like if I can pay $10, cook at home, you know, if you take in the cost of the subscription for your streaming service and it's $9.99, I know Disney Plus was $6.99 at one point, but I think it just went up to $10. Taking the cost of that subscription, cost of whatever it costs to feed yourself, you have the ability to pause it if somebody needs to go to the bathroom. You can go and do this. It's just a mega different convenience, right? So it's just night and day, and you know, like the pandemic made people hold on to their money a lot tighter. Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't blame people with that approach, and I agree with that approach 100% of the way. I don't really see a lot of families going unless it's a holiday. Like when I went to go see Thanksgiving, of course, families weren't going to go see Thanksgiving, but there were a lot of movies that were out at that point that a lot of people were there on Thanksgiving Day to go and see, right? So, yeah.
And I do want to say and emphasize, like, I definitely don't blame people for doing that, right? Like, if you want to see it on streaming, you know, see it on streaming. That's your money, you know, you get to make the decision. But I guess I get frustrated when I hear the studios complain, like, we're not making our returns. And it's like, well, you guys already kind of set this weird precedent with streaming and the way you're releasing your movies theatrically. You could have kept doing what you were doing. I know the pandemic was a strange time, but it's just kind of this weird precedent I feel like they put themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
They never really, I have a few different points, but to piggyback off of what Gabe said, it's like you said, I think they've conditioned people into believing that this is how things are going to be regarding releases. So it's like you said, well, why am I going to go to the theater when I know it's going to be on streaming in a month? Well, I'll just wait a month and save my money and just watch it on streaming for a lower cost. So that's one thing that I think is a problem. I think during COVID, it made sense because, you know, people were trying to be safe. We were trying to be, you know, understanding and aware of like the dangers that existed with COVID and group settings and all that. And that all made sense for the time. I just never think they transitioned out of that appropriately, right? Back to what it was before. Now, obviously, COVID had an impact on people psychologically where there are some people that maybe went to a movie theater before COVID and now they're not going to do that again, just like they wouldn't go to a crowded restaurant again. And I know people that still think that way. So, you know, there's always going to be a segment of the population that's affected by something to a degree that they are going to change their lifestyle habits. They are going to change how they go about doing things. And that falls into that. So we have to take that into account. But I think the majority of people, like post-COVID, like, I don't know if anybody's like me, like I was sick of COVID, you know, after the first year of it. I was done. I was ready to go back to normal. You know, I wanted to go to movie theaters again. I wanted to go out to bars and restaurants and hang out and, you know, be with friends and acquaintances and family. And so I just think they have to find a better way to market these movies. I think the approach of trying to release it theatrically and then saying, well, it's also going to be available on streaming, you know, 3 or 4 weeks from now, it's not working. It's not working. And if I could get into a little bit of, and we talked about this with the Marvel episode with when we talked about streaming and physical media, I guess we could say, it's the dynamic of streaming is obviously different. The revenue stream is structured differently. We talked about this before where with theatrical releases, you know, you're getting your revenue right from the theater. You're getting it right from the box office. You're getting it right from that run. With streaming, it's kind of weird because it's kind of spread out across your subscriber base, right? So, and I don't know the specifics of how that works, but what I do know, and I think we can kind of make this assumption based on how things have been performing and what's going on, is that they're bound to make more of their money back if they keep things in theaters as opposed to doing this thing where it's like, it's going to be in the theater for a month and then it's going to be on streaming. You can watch it whenever you want. I think they need to delay that a little more. I think they need to focus more so on marketing these movies exclusively for movie theaters. And I wouldn't even mention the streaming aspect of it if they want to capitalize on that box office. If they really want to focus on making the most money possible with some of these movies, especially the bigger budget ones. And we're going to get into that with like Indiana Jones and Killers of the Flower Moon. I just think they need to have a more focused approach to marketing solely on movie theaters and that experience, right? Movies like Top Gun, movies like Avatar, we know those movies are going to make money. Top Gun kind of came out of nowhere. It turned into this word of mouth kind of thing, and we can all agree. I think Top Gun 2 Maverick was a sequel that nobody expected to be as good as it was. But we all heard from the beginning, no, Tom Cruise does not want this movie on streaming. They're saving it for the theater. That was their whole marketing aspect from the beginning. Even when they delayed it, that was their whole reason, was like, no, this movie deserves to be seen in theater and it's going to be worth the wait. We heard that from the beginning once we started getting news of the delays because of COVID. And obviously for good reason. And when that movie finally came out, it took off. You know, it was word of mouth and a really great marketing campaign. I mean, that's an example of how to do that. Now, I mean, the marketing for that movie, I'm sure, was costly, astronomical. But I think it's a good example of how to approach it. Avatar was obviously going to be big. I don't know what the returns were for Way of Water, but those movies are kind of like event movies. I just think they have to take more of that approach and kind of make it an event. If you make it more of an event, then people are going to go see it. Now, obviously, you can't do that for every film. But I just think they have to structure their approach and kind of select which movies are going to do that for, you know, and there's like 2 or 3 movies a year that studios put out that maybe make a lot of money and the rest of them really don't. And it's been that way before. It's just that today with the cost of these budgets, with these budgets being hyperinflated, it's just much harder to do that. And I want to also just touch on, I guess, before we move on, that I agree with the whole mediocrity thing too, with things feeling generic, with things feeling there's nothing unique anymore that really grabs your attention, and that's also part of the problem. And I don't blame the studios for doing that, because what they're trying to do is really hold on to the one thing that they think is going to make them the most money, right? If we market this to everybody and we try to make this something for the masses, right? Yeah, the end result is it's going to be a generic story because they're trying to appeal to as many people as possible and make the most returns on that product. But at the same time, I think it's inherently the problem that they're experiencing. It's why they're not making money, because people are starting to catch on to that. And I think, like you guys are saying, people are just tired of it. So they're in an interesting predicament, because I think, and we can talk about Godzilla in a bit, but I think Godzilla is an example of what we need to see more of. And I think we need to see more studios take those risks and maybe minimize some of these budgets and try experimenting with that moving forward to see if it works, because that is a movie that I think it should be shown in executive boardrooms across the country. I just, in terms of Hollywood, right? I just think that is a perfect example of how to take a small budget and make something meaningful, make something that resonates with audiences, and just a film that's really well written, well acted, well done. The VFX everything about that movie just blows my mind. And we can get into that in a bit, but I just think they have to take a different approach. You know, $200+ million for a movie that's only going to make, like in the case of Wish, 81 million. I mean, that's not sustainable. Yeah. So they really need to change their approach and find a different way to resonate with audiences and market these movies differently. And I think it's a bit of what we talked about with Marvel as well. I think we're seeing that with all kinds of genres. I don't think it necessarily matters what kind of movie it is. I think specifically with the superhero genre, we had that whole debate about whether it's superhero fatigue. I think that genre is suffering more so than others just because we've seen so many of those films. Right? More so than any other movie. They're just released at such a higher frequency that the burnout effect takes place faster. But at the same time, I think it's a problem in general with just generic storytelling. I just think with the amount of content that's out there today, people see more of the same thing, like naturally, you're going to want to seek out something different. Eventually, you're going to be like, no, I've seen this before. I want something else. I want something unique. I want something that's going to resonate with me, something that I haven't seen. Right. So
Yeah.
I just think they need to follow that and be more in tune with audiences and understand that people are starting to go in that direction. So those are my thoughts.
And you, something else, because I know we're going to get into Killers of the Flower Moon and Napoleon, which both of those movies, I think they're both Apple.
Yep.
Yeah, Apple produced movies. So it's also a weird dynamic too when you have Netflix does it too, obviously, like they did with Glass Onion and Don't Look Up and all these other movies, where it's like they're the ones that are actually producing it. They're a streaming service, and a big thing with their movies, it's like, you know, we'll have it in theaters for a week or 2 weeks, but they're like $200 million budget movies,
As if that's
and
gonna
I'm
be,
like, yeah, I'm like, I don't understand that. So I mean, if you look at, I mean, Killers of the Flower Moon, budget $200 million. It's made, I guess, globally 150 million right now. I mean, to me, I don't know the economics of streaming, but to me, like, at least right now, you're under 50 million. And because, I mean, you haven't made back your marketing and all that stuff like we talked about. And then Napoleon, I think it's at like 90 million with like a $200 budget around there. So it's, and as soon as you see the trailer where it says Apple Plus, people, I think, instantly know, like, okay, I can watch that on streaming. It's like, why am I going to wait to see that in theaters when it's going to be in streaming? And on top of it, when you have an issue like Napoleon, where they said, yeah, we're going to have an extra hour of footage for the streaming version, why am I going to go see it in theaters when I can get a whole hour of footage that Ridley probably wanted in the movie to begin with, but it was probably cut just because of, you know, the theatrical release? So I think that that's another, I mean, that's a whole other topic probably, but like the actual streaming services starting to produce theatrical movies with big budgets, and they're only releasing them for like a week, 2 weeks at a time, which is bonkers to me. It's just strange, man, because Martin Scorsese is a big name, Ridley Scott's a big name, and the fact that, you know, they're releasing movies and they're underperforming, that says a lot. I think kind of like what Will said, with you do have like 1 or 2 movies a year. I think this year, obviously, it was the Barbie Oppenheimer thing. I think that was just lightning in a bottle. I think that was just a weird situation where, you know, those 2 films kind of fed off of each other.
Yeah, they were memed to death too, and that kind of fit into the whole craze, right? So I mean, we'll see that every now and then. That happens. It becomes like a cultural event, right? And
I kind of, and it's kind of weird for me to say this because you guys know I love Christopher Nolan. I disagree with him a little bit when he had an interview recently where he said Oppenheimer's proof that people are Oppenheimer's proof that people want to go to the movie theater. I don't think he's a humble dude. I don't think he realizes how big his name is. You know, when his name's on something, people are going to go see it. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of just this rare thing. And with Barbie feeding off Oppenheimer, it was just a weird dynamic where everyone was going to the movies for July. I don't see that happening with every other big budget movie. You know what I mean? If someone else tried to do some other, you know, kind of a J. Robert Oppenheimer kind of movie, it's not going to be making $300 million like his did. So it's a weird dynamic. I think they need to look at, you know, the stories they're telling, their budgets, and maybe look at A24, because A24 puts out a lot of good movies with a lot of smaller budgets, and a lot of them actually do pretty well. I think, you know, Everything Everywhere All at Once, that was within the past like year and a half. The Whale, a whole bunch of other movies that they've released that I think probably have done pretty well with very small budgets.
And I want to follow up with, go ahead, Gabe.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like what you brought up with Godzilla too. I mean, $15 million budget.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Godzilla and what we think. I mean, there's certain, the techniques used in that movie. I mean, just the way it was shot, the way it was filmed, it's just a perfect example of something that feels big budget, that feels larger than life. Like I feel like that's a movie that I would see in the heat of blockbuster season in the summer.
Yeah. 100%.
And here it is. It's December 3rd right now when we're recording this, right? It's not your typical time frame for a movie like that to be released. Obviously, this has to do with the international schedule and it being a Japanese film, you know, from Toho, but that has a lot to do with the release time frame. But yeah, I mean, that for $15 million, that feels like a $150 million movie, right? And I want to pose this question too, because I mean, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but like with a lot of these more recent blockbusters, like with Indiana Jones, I mean, the budget for that movie was crazy. Sometimes I watch these movies and I find myself asking, like, where does the money go? Right. And it's like
100%.
with Godzilla, it's like, wow, they really made the most of every penny of this
Yeah.
budget, and the movie is not perfect. It has its flaws. We're not going to get into spoilers. We'll talk about it in a bit, but it's one of those films where I was in awe when I didn't even know it was 15 million, to be honest. Gabe, I read your review and I think you mentioned it in your Letterboxd review, and I immediately looked it up. Like, there's no way. And I was just, I was shocked.
You're like,
I
Gabe's on drugs.
Yeah, he left out a zero.
Yeah. No, for sure, man.
It's just one of those things. It's just like where does the money go, and like are they like throwing money at the right things? I just feel like, and to piggyback off of what you said with A24, there was that news several weeks ago. I think it was back in October or mid October about A24 wanting to get into bigger budget movies.
Mm.
And I'll preface that, like, bigger budget for them, like as far as their budgets are concerned. That doesn't mean they're going to start cranking out like $200 million, films. But I think that'll be an interesting thing to see unfold. I'm really excited for that because I'm hoping that once we see the results of that initiative, I'm hoping that catches on, and I'm hoping that other studios look at that as a blueprint and say, okay, well, if they can make it work. Because Godzilla is one example, but Godzilla is an international movie. Like, internationally, we talked about this before we went live. It's different. Like, the Japanese film industry, the international film industry, the cost of making movies is different elsewhere. So we have to factor that into why budgets are different in Europe than they are in America, and more so for Asia, right? So that has a lot to do with it. But at the same time, I think a U.S.-based company like A24 or production studio in this case, if they're able to make it work with a blueprint that other studios can kind of follow, then I think that's going to be good. I think that might be game-changing. And I don't want to hype up the A24 thing. They're one of those studios, and not that they haven't made movies that are like not personally for me. I don't like everything that they put out, but most of the things I've seen from them have been consistently, their quality has been consistent.
Yeah.
Right. Personal preferences aside, they found a way to make it work. So if they can do that with bigger budgets and find a nice middle ground to be able to make movies financially successful in the theater, then I'm hoping that other studios can catch on, and maybe in the next several years we'll start to see that. But I think Barbie is a good example. I mean, you talked about Oppenheimer, Gabe. I agree with that regarding Nolan. I think a lot of people saw that movie because it was Nolan, and he's a household name at this point. I mean, he's had, blockbuster after blockbuster. I mean, he's up there with Scorsese at this point. He's up there with Spielberg.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question or debate around that. But Barbie is a movie that was also very successful. And, kudos to Greta Gerwig. I mean, I've seen some of her other films. She's incredibly talented, but Greta Gerwig is not a household name, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's an example of a story or a movie that did well, where you don't have like a star-studded cast. I mean, Margot Robbie, obviously she's well known, but Ryan Gosling as well. But I don't see them being household names to the point where everybody is going to want to go and see it. So I think Barbie is an example of a movie that did well financially, I should say, that isn't the norm. It's not your normal summer blockbuster. And we talked about that before. Oppenheimer isn't either, but I think hopefully there's starting to be a turning point here where not only audiences are speaking out and starting to make their opinions known, with their wallets, but hopefully, on the other hand, like you made the comment, Chase, about what Bob Iger said. I mean, I'm hoping that we start seeing more executives show up. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, whether or not executives should be on sets, but I think if they're trying to make an effort to get a better idea of what audiences want and what works, then hopefully that's a step in the right direction. I don't want to look at it from a negative standpoint. I'm trying to be positive about the whole thing.
Always.
So I'm hoping that means that, like, yeah, we should be more involved in what's going on, as opposed to just sitting in a meeting and just okaying something, and then that's the last, like, something just crosses your desk and it's like, okay, cool, green light it,
check mark. Yeah.
check mark, So hopefully that means that they're going to take more initiative and actually start paying more attention to what people are responding to and what's resonating with audiences and listening to feedback. I mean, I'm hoping that makes some kind of change, but I do think the streaming thing is really has to get ironed out. And it's interesting, right? Because we've had discussions on different things. We've had discussions on physical media and the state of physical copies of movies. We've had discussions on the Marvel thing. And it's weird because streaming kind of ties into all of this, right? It's kind of like the elephant in the room where it's just affecting all these different things. I still think it's going to take some time, but I really think they need to iron out what movies are going to save for theatrical runs and what movies are going to delegate to streaming. Because right now they're kind of in this middle ground where it's like, oh, well, you can have your cake and eat it too, but it's not really working, right? Because I think, like you said, Gabe, if I know a movie's going to be available on streaming, like Napoleon's a perfect example. Personally, like someone in my position, I'm not going to watch that movie twice. I don't want to watch it I don't want to watch a 3-hour cut and then watch a 4-hour cut. And like, oh, okay, this is the cut. I'm just going to watch the 4-hour cut. I'm not going to go see the 3-hour cut in the theater.
Especially when you know it exists before.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like, well, you kind of just gave away. I mean, now it's not working in their favor because someone like me, now I'm not going to see it in the theater. If I know that the 4-hour cut is the one that the director prefers, then me being, the collector and the cinephile that I am, I'm going to want to watch that one. I'm going to want to watch Ridley's version.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like these things that they're doing, like these marketing things that they're throwing in there. It's just, they're kind of like working against them, to be honest, in my opinion. So
yeah, and I want to pose this as well. I was thinking about it. I don't have enough stats to really back up this claim, but things that kind of tend to come out and do extremely well, like Oppenheimer. That's Universal, right? It's not Paramount.
Yeah.
So Universal doesn't have a streaming front, right? So you don't know when you're going to get to see it. Like we were all curious when the 4K was going to come out. We weren't sure. Well,
Nolan was also saying he wanted it in theaters for 6 months. He made
Nolan
that part of the agreement.
Yeah, and see that's awesome because then now you got a cinema experience, stuff like that, and then take somewhere because Will, you jogged a thought process by bringing up A24 because of the massive success off of a 15. Now it's been adjusted because they added a lot more advertising after it started getting really good word of mouth, and so the budget went a little bit higher. $14.3 million budget for Everything Everywhere All at Once with 4 video effects coordinators that worked.
Wait, that was $14 million?
Yeah, $14.3 million.
Are you serious? I did not know that.
It made $141.2 million. So there's an audience. Is that billions? No, but it doesn't need to do billions whenever you don't have a $200 million budget.
That's exactly the point. That's exactly the point is if
like,
you're not throwing all the money in to begin with, you don't have to worry as much about your returns. And then you're able to not worry about your returns, knowing that, okay, there's a good chance that this is going to do well because we put our money in the right places. You can take more risks. Mm-hmm. You can tell stories that are unique and intricate instead of having to go the generic route. We talked about this. I don't know if it was on a podcast or not. I don't remember if it was a pre-discussion. But, I was talking to somebody and actually Gabe, I think, I don't know if we can shout out another creator, but Chris Stuckman mentioned this in one of his videos, right? And I watch his videos time to time. He talked about the state of Hollywood and movie making and how, executives, it's very hard for studios to approve original and new and unique ideas when there's such big budgets behind them because they don't want to take risks because they need to make their returns at that point, right? It's not so much that they don't want to do that. They just have to answer to their investors at the end of the day, right? So I think starting from smaller budgets and using that as a stepping stone and as a blueprint moving forward, I think that's the way to go. I think they need to start looking at more initiatives to fund projects. Not that they can't have their big budget movies as well, but it's like they obviously have money to play around with in some of these cases. Why not try something like A24 and like Universal? They could build a branch that focuses on those kind of movies, more intimate, lower budget movies. There's no reason why they couldn't do that. By doing that, you're already appealing to this a subset of the population because A24, they have their fan base. There are people out there that are like diehard A24 fans, right? It doesn't even matter about the movie. It's just the fact that it's A24. So A24, they've established an identity and a brand by doing what they do.
Small
Right.
budgets,
So there's no
big production
reason.
value.
Exactly.
Yep.
And there's
Yep.
no reason. There's no reason that other studios cannot do that. Right. And just
Well,
they make it their own. You know, they market it in a way that visually and aesthetically it fits their own brand. There's a way to do it. You know,
they need
it's
to look at
possible.
their own. I mean, like for Disney, for instance, like I mean, they need to look at, you know, we brought up Indiana Jones. They need to look at Indiana Jones. They need, and even Paramount with Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning this year. You know what I mean? Like that movie underperformed. I think it made, you know, pretty much what the budget was, which is mind blowing because Mission Impossible is a big brand name. It's a big IP. So I think these studio execs, man, they need to start looking like, hey, we've had big IPs that have bombed, that they're not doing as well as we thought they were. And I think that's because people are maybe getting tired of just the same old stories. And maybe I don't need a $250 million for budget for a Mission Impossible movie. You know what I mean? Maybe there's a way to make it work where you're not spending as much. I mean, like look at Oppenheimer. That movie looked like it was like a $200 budget, but honestly, I think it was like 90 million, 100 million. You gotta, these studios need to work with the budgets they have and set a boundary with it and try to squeeze as much as they can. Because honestly, someone had brought up a video to me in the Discord, I think it was, where they were looking at special effects from what was it, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, Davy Jones, compared to like the CGI of today. And honestly, Davy Jones looks better, and that movie's like freaking almost 20 years old at this point, which is mind-boggling to me. Like, you know, Disney is, I don't know what's going on with their budgets. Will, you'd posed that question earlier. It's like, where's that money going when you have a movie that's like 16 years old that's looking better than most of the movies that you're putting out today?
Right.
So they need to look at where the money's going, and they need to look at the fact that IPs are not a guaranteed way of making money anymore. Just because it's a popular IP. Yeah. Look at Indiana Jones. That's a classic IP. I mean, I went to go see it. I was stoked. Probably the biggest disappointment of the year for me, but it underperformed. And I think that's just something that they need to start looking at and coming to grips with, is that they need to start releasing more original content. Otherwise, they're gonna further push themselves in a corner where they're gonna get stuck and they're not gonna know what to do. And I like your idea, Will, of just kind of maybe having each studio have maybe its own kind of subset that's making more kind of smaller budget or independent. Like I know Sony has like Sony Classics, don't they? Or who has Vintage?
Yes.
Is that Sony?
I know Sony does Sony Classics. I don't know who does.
Or maybe
the
Paramount. That's Paramount, I think, right?
Yeah.
Vintage, or one of them. Like I think they do have like these studios. I think they do exist, right? But they haven't really been pushing movies out that much. So I think that they really need to look at what A24 is doing. And I think the reason A24 is doing well is not only just because they're smaller budgets, but at least for me as a moviegoer, they're just original stories, man. Every time I look at a trailer, I'm like, that looks so unique. That looks so different. I don't know how that story is going to pan out. It's not like Wish where, I could probably predict the plot right now and tell you what's going to happen at the end. It's different. Right. You look at an A24 movie, it's like, I don't know how that movie's going to pan out. I don't know what the story's going to be like, and I'm excited for it because of that reason. Because I can go in the movie theater and look at that movie and just be taken away, and kind of, you're in this kind of unpredictable journey, so to speak. Every other movie we kind of know, you know what I mean? I think that maybe that's another reason why Indiana Jones and Mission Impossible and all these other big IP movies aren't doing well. It's just you kind of know how it's going to end. You kind of know what's going to happen. The good guy's going to save the day. You know what I mean? And A24 doesn't really do that. Sometimes they take these twists and turns where my jaw just drops and I'm like, holy crap! Like you guys literally just did that, like with Hereditary. So yeah, I think they need to kind of be cognizant and aware of that. Big IPs do not equal big revenue streams anymore. Yep. And they need to kind of look at more original stories. They have stacks of screenplays that these studios just purchase and warehouse. Like I had learned recently that American Gangster was sitting on a shelf for like freaking 10 years or something like that. And Ridley or someone just pulled it off the shelf, was like, yeah, I'll make a movie. I'll make a movie for it. Yeah, and it turns out being a great movie. So these studios have a bunch of screenplays and stories that they can use. They just shelf them and they don't utilize them.
Yeah. And like I want to also
I want to answer Oh, Chase, I was just going to say,
go ahead.
Universal, I think they do have a streaming service. It's Peacock. So Universal
Oh
is
yeah, they do have
the
Peacock.
Universal.
I forget Peacock
Yeah.
exists sometimes.
It's great,
That
though.
was
Yeah.
that was going to be my point, right? I don't think I haven't seen Peacock advertised, and I don't see a lot of movies advertised for like exclusive streaming on Peacock. Not as much as Netflix
They
and
did
Apple and the
Kills.
other streaming services for some reason.
Yeah,
Halloween Kills, right? But
Yeah.
that was same day.
In
Wasn't
5
that day
nights.
and date release?
Mhm.
So,
In 5
Yeah,
nights.
same day.
Which, I mean, is
yeah.
good, like, because I wasn't going to go see 5 nights in theaters at all. But I turned it on. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
the way I like to pose things, right, to like this whole formula, right, is like I categorize what I'm going to go see in 2 categories: a popcorn flick and an intriguing flick is how I categorize most things, right? If I like see the trailer for Godzilla -1, wow, this looks kind of different from everything else Godzilla related I've seen. An A24 trailer, even though the whale looks like the most generic story ever, it's A24. So once I see the logo on there, it's going to be, okay, what are they going to do with this, with the story about this guy, his identity and everything like that? They're going to do something different. I'm going to go in there and I'm not just going to see a character study. I'm going to see something evolve past a character study. Something like Mission Impossible, I know what I'm getting into. Something like, you know, exactly like what you're saying, I passively eat it passively watch it and passively eat the popcorn while consuming that. Something like X, right? You know, I talk about X all the time because that was my favorite movie of last year. X took something that was tried and true and made it its own, right? With Ty West, whenever it came to the way that he does things with Mia Goth and everything like that, then you get something like Pearl, right? So then Pearl looked pretty generic, but it was Mia Goth's performance that made it so damn captivating, right?
Yeah.
It just made it feel like something so different. The dialogue, the story, the way it was shot and overcoated with Technicolor, everything about that. Like, even if I don't get something completely different story-wise, I know I'm going to go in there and get a visual feast on something that's visually different. The way that it was shot, the way that it was portrayed to me. Everything's going to be completely different. And that's why I'm a huge fan. I'm one of those A24 bros. I'm not even going to lie. I'm not going to hide it. I'm sure you're going to see an A24 banner back here. I mean, there's an A24 movie. Yeah.
It's a great studio, man.
Well, yeah.
Halfway
Midsommar,
there. Yeah.
And
So, it's great. Midsommar was, shout out to that. That was a weird ass movie, you know?
Super weird.
Super different. The way it was shot, the way Ari Aster did it. It's called also like a shout out to Hereditary as well, Gabe. It's not my favorite, you know, but I still recognize it as great. You took the story of something Exorcist-esque, you know, something about like in that realm, and you made it something with its own identity to the point where most people have seen Hereditary, you know, or heard about it at this point. For such a small studio, even The Witch, I can ask a lot of people about The Witch, and they've heard of it. May not have seen it, but they've heard of it, right? It's the way that they get word of mouth to do the advertising for them. They drop a trailer, they don't do much past that, and then they let the word of mouth of people like ourselves talk about it and sell itself. Now, do these movies, I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is their second highest grossing. I forget what their highest grossing movie is. It's not I think it was Hereditary up until.
It might have been Hereditary.
Hereditary, yeah.
It was Hereditary before that. But that movie took like the cinema world by storm when it came out. I remember you could not have a conversation about movies for a few months when that movie came out. Like, have you seen it? Have you seen it? You know? So I think it's just that. It's one of those cinematic experiences that you kind of want to see before somebody tells you, oh, this is what's different about it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what's going to get you to go in there. Like, who's going to sit there whenever it comes to Mission Impossible outside of the way that the stunts are done? That's what gets you to go there for that, right? That's what that series does differently. Tom Cruise does his own stunts. You have long sequences for the stunts, you know? That's what gets you going, right? Same thing with Mad Max Fury Road whenever that came out. Everything except for the sandstorms and the waterfall scene was completely practical. Tom Hardy's head hanging over the side of one of the rigs, completely practical. They were driving that rig with his head 2 inches above the sand with Charlize Theron holding him. Then right after that, you had Inside Out that you brought up earlier. That, outside of Barbie and Oppenheimer, was, I'm sure there's other ones, was like the biggest back-to-back phenomenon I had seen. Everybody was going to go see Mad Max, and then everybody was talking about Inside Out. So you had 2 different flavors and tastes competing within a very short amount of time of each other for your attention with wholly original stories, right? It's not like Mad Max is known for its story. It's really the practical effects, but that is my favorite movie of all time. And that's why, because I went in there and it's the first movie I ever walked out of, went back in and purchased another ticket to go see it in 3D.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was great, man. Like I had to go see it in 3D.
Yeah, it's a freaking phenomenal movie.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way that it's changing, like the way that we consume it. Because then I didn't know when Mad Max would come out on Blu-ray because 4K wasn't around at that point. It was amongst the first waves, but I didn't know how long I'd have to wait to go see it again. So I'd go and spend my money to go watch it as many times as I wanted to. Same with all of that. Yeah, it's just shifted so much.
I'm gonna put myself in a hot seat because I know Will, you had, yeah, I know, right? This is gonna be a very unpopular opinion, but like, what's that other YouTuber's name? Chris, I always butcher his name.
Chris Stuckman.
Chris Stuckman
is he's a content creator on YouTube. He
good
became
content.
popular doing a lot of movie reviews. He worked hard, and he's actually I believe he's a filmmaker now. I don't know if he's done or he's either still funding his first project.
I think he's finished it. I could be wrong, but when I watched his video about the kind of like the state of cinema, something that bounced out to me, and this is a hot take. I think we have to also take responsibility with the way we're consuming movies too, man. I know a lot of people. Like I said, I completely respect people that. Obviously not everyone can afford to go to the movie theater. Not everyone can, spend, $70 to go see a movie. But I think a lot of people have also gotten lazy, man. I mean, it's as simple as that. I think a lot of people are just kind of like, well, I could just stay at home and I don't have to go out. And I think this is a more deeper philosophical argument, but I think as human beings, we have always gravitated towards telling stories together. You know what I mean? And I think that's what, I think the cinema is like this ultimate culmination of like human beings witnessing and sharing stories together in a single setting, right? I mean, we went from, campfires to plays to now like, we have these giant cinemas where we kind of witness things together. And I think technology, it's just really taken people away from that. I think people don't invest, into stories anymore. I think we're just kind of really complacent and we're kind of almost spoiled in the sense where it's just like, screw it, I'll just watch it at home. Yeah. And I think that's at the end of the day, that's going to be one of the biggest factors that also, contribute to the downfall of theaters. Because I can see that happening where these theaters are just kind of, they're begging for people to come. And people aren't going, you know what I mean? And there's so many different variables that we talked about. It's the streaming, it's the movie studios, it's the budgets, but it's also us too. You know what I mean? When I hear people on Reddit just saying like, oh, I'm just going to see it. Like, I have a good sound system and a good TV. I could just watch it at home. It's like, dude, like that's not really a movie you want to watch at home. That's a movie you want to experience with other people. Like that happened the most with Dune, the first Dune that came out. Everyone's like, I just watch it at home. I'm like, no, that's not, dude. That's like a movie you want to experience. It's not a movie that you just want to watch. You want to experience it. Yeah. And I think people need to take responsibility in doing that and kind of appreciate that these writers, these directors, these stuntmen, these producers, every single person that works on a movie, they put so much hard work to cater it to a theatrical experience that's how you should watch it. And when you're kind of watching it at home, you're kind of just taking away from that a little bit. And don't get me wrong, like you said, Chase, that there's movies, for sure, that I'm like, I'm gonna watch that one on streaming because it's just not my thing. Right. But I think if everyone, no matter what your movie tastes are, if you just kind of invest a little bit and just say like, I'm going to go see this movie in movie theater, I think that will go a long way. But I think we've just kind of become really lazy and complacent. We just don't go to the movies as much as we used to.
I've got a great, it's not really a counter argument, maybe just a counter thought to that, right? Like you said, because it triggered once you said that, like, as human beings, we have a responsibility for essentially how we consume things and a sense of ownership, more or less, right? Also, at the same time, as technology advances and as businesses get bigger, more responsibility gets put on an individual, right? To go a little bit off track with movies, but all encompassing, right? So, I'm a perfect example right now. Like there's been times that we have tried to plan things Thursday, Friday, Saturdays. Chase is not available. My Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, which I would love to go see a movie Thursday night, but by the time I'm getting off work, the last showing has already stopped. You know what I mean? So then my one day off is today's, which I dedicate to this. And then if I can squeeze some time in there with everything else I'm trying to catch up on, it's a sacrifice I got to make. But if I have things I got to do at home, then I can just turn it on. And if it's something like Ant-Man, that's how I watch that. I don't need to sit there and stare at the TV. You know what I mean? I can get a little distracted, run over here, do something, keep it playing, come back, not miss a dang thing, That falls in the category of the popcorn flicks that I was talking about, not an intriguing flick. So that one's I'm not going to go put myself into whenever I'm going to sit there for like 3 hours. I'm like, oh, geez, I got to go home and do this. Geez, my phone's blowing up. I got to answer it. So I think it's just like you said, is that there's so much convenience whenever some people, it's an excuse for some people and not for others, where there's just so much we got to do in a day that,
for sure.
I didn't realize this, and shout out to the server for bringing this to my attention. But there's some people on the server that have to drive upwards of an hour to get to a movie theater. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought those were,
do it.
and
they do it repeatedly.
And they do it. Because where I've always grown up, regardless of where it was at the time, a movie theater wasn't more than 20 minutes at most for me. It's almost like a convenience store. You're going to find them pretty much everywhere, from mom and pop to big name chains, right? So I think that's really where streaming gets it, because like I can come home, or like on my remote days from work, I can sit in front of my setup, grab my laptop, sit over there, type up paperwork, do reports, stuff like that, and then have my movie playing right there, and I can get the full experience, right? It sucks to sometimes have to view movies that way, but sometimes I have to live within the confines of the cards that I'm dealt with. And I think some people also kind of think of that whenever it comes to their families, right? Somebody gets off, one of my friends did it. He didn't get to go see Guardians of the Galaxy. So the day it dropped for Disney Plus, he got off work. All right, family, get over here. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 playing live right now the second that it drops and I get home, because rounding up the kids, getting them, and then it goes back to the budget and just getting everybody, right? So, no, but I definitely agree with it. But to go back to the very first point that you made, Gabe, Warner Brothers really shifted that landscape, because that was my biggest worry. Sonic and Birds of Prey, I think, had 3 days in theaters before they all got shut down, I want to say. I got to go see Sonic in theaters before the theater shut down. That was the last movie I got to go see. And I had a blast with it. But then very shortly after, it was available for rent after it made its money. And then, there's movies like Sonic and Dolby Cinema. Man, whenever he does his spin dash, it gets you going a different type of way in theaters, my man. So it's an experience. But I think there's just so many variables, and especially like work, like the work culture that we have, especially here in America. A lot of the times it can be work. And there's people that take really good control of that, It's culture with counterculture at the same time, a yin yang type of system, right? Then convenience is the biggest draw for most people, and going to the theaters isn't the biggest convenience. Streaming is. You can get a Black Friday, some TVs 75 inches for $400. Boom, slap that bad boy up on your wall. All you need is your internet that you already have. Endless movies, $10 a month. And it's hard to say no if you aren't a quality advocate like we are. It's hard to say no to an endless library, even if you don't care that it may not be there in 30 days. Some people only care that they can watch it now,
Right.
So, that would be, not like I said, there's a counter thought to that whenever it comes to that.
Yeah, and it's just not realistic, obviously, for everyone to go see a movie, in the movie theater. But I think it's just kind of the answers in between. Go ahead, Will.
No, I was just going to piggyback off of that. I agree with both of you. Movie theaters are, at least, I've always viewed them as a communal experience. You're not just going to watch it by yourself. You're going to watch it with a group of people who are, in most cases, strangers, unless you're going with family or friends. But the most fun I've had at the movies is when I was with friends, right? We talked about movies we saw when we were younger. I can call back to like something like The Dark Knight, and I mentioned this movie before, but one of the reasons I think why that movie resonates so much with me is obviously it's a great movie on its own, and I'm a fan of Nolan's work with that film. I think it's the best out of that trilogy, not to go off on a tangent about that, but it was just when I saw it, I was in high school at the time, Friday night showing, it was in an IMAX, sold out. The lines were fucking crazy, dude. Just the whole atmosphere of that night. Like, it just brings me back. I can picture it so clearly in my mind right now. And
Yeah,
like just
same.
the scenes in that movie, like as it played, like just looking around at everybody else in the theater and you're just fucking like taking that moment in, dude. And like that's why I go to movie theaters, and you don't get that experience every time. Obviously, it depends on the type of movie that you're seeing and whether or not your theater is packed or not. But and that's varied. I mean, Thanksgiving for me, it was decent. You know, there were a lot of people in Godzilla, which was weird because for the time of day that I went, I didn't expect there to be as many people as there were, but I'm glad that there were because it definitely got a few reactions here and there, especially with like the the heat beam scenes,
Yeah.
the atomic breath. I mean, that's one of those things, like seeing that in the theater and just hearing people gasp and just it was like that just makes it more of an experience for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say that you can't have that experience at home, you know, but there's nothing better than going to see a film that you hope is going to be good and then not only to have your expectations fucking shattered, but to see that other people are enjoying it as well. It's different. Like with The Dark Knight, I just remember the energy in that room, in that theater, right?
It's the atmosphere.
It's the
It's
atmosphere,
like the emotional
dude, and
wave that you ride.
Mm-hmm.
it
It's
is, and
contagious.
that's and people like directors like Tarantino have touched on that. You know, the communal experience of going to a theater. Like it started with the drive-in, you know, back in the 50s and 60s, and it's kind of continued, you know, today with movie theaters. And I think as much as streaming is convenient, and there is a significance and a place for streaming, I don't think that I wouldn't want to live in a world without streaming because everything has its benefits. I see a lot of movies. I watch a lot of movies on streaming. Shout out to Tubi. I mean, we talk about Tubi a lot. I don't know if we've talked about it on air, but you know, Tubi's one of those streaming sites that is incredibly beneficial for somebody like me. It's where I discover a lot of the lower budget independent cult exploitation films that I like. Tubi's got a wide variety of that. They also have a lot of foreign films.
Yep, great.
Not to plug them. I'm not trying to turn this into a plug for Tubi, but I'm just it's free, everybody.
Yeah.
But Tubi's an example of streaming being beneficial for somebody, whether it's to discover something new that you might want to buy on physical copy that you're unsure of, or just to watch something just convenient. You know, I don't feel like going out. I'm just going to sit home and just watch something on Tubi, or you can do that on Netflix or anything else. So streaming has its place. I just think it's a little bit of both. I think movie theaters are important. I think they're culturally significant, and we should try our best as consumers to support them. You know, even if the cost of like popcorn and soda and all that stuff, it's high. It's a lot of money, but I try to do it when I can because that's how theaters make most of their money.
Yeah,
is from concessions. So I try to go whenever I can, and luckily I've been blessed right now with more downtime than I normally have. I've been able to see a lot of movies in the theater, which I'm grateful for. And you know, some of experience have been okay, some of them not so good, some of them have been great. So I think it's important to kind of push that. And I don't know if you guys have gotten this, but I've seen more so lately, there seems to be, at least from what I'm reading and what I see online and like in person with amongst my friends, like there seems to be this push for people to want to go see and support more independent movies in theaters. Like I remember seeing it with like Barbie and Oppenheimer, like as much as there was like a lot of the meme stuff going on and that whole thing, I heard a lot of people saying like, no, we need to go see these movies because they're different and we need to support them to send a message. People are saying the same thing about Godzilla. People said the same thing about Thanksgiving. Like it's, especially this year, I've been seeing that message reiterated like time and time again. So I do think there is, you know, there's something more to that I think we need to be aware of. So
it's like, I think it also comes down to like how much things get thrown in your face. You know what I mean? Like the advertising for Wish, it's everywhere right now. You know, like you go on Instagram, you're going to get an ad for it. You know, and it's kind of like another Pixar movie. Like to go back full circle, but then whenever you see something like Everything Everywhere All at Once, when it came out last year, and the lady's got hot dogs for fingers, it's gonna draw your attention. You know what I mean? You can just tell when something looks different. Does it always pay off? No, of course not. Everything's not guaranteed or 100%, but I absolutely back you. That's the way I felt about Thanksgiving. You know, I wanted to go see it. I wanted to let them know that there's an audience for this. Thank you for listening to 20 plus years of fans from Grindhouse asking for this trailer to be made into a movie. I'm going to go give you the money to support it. you guys have bullied me into going to go see Godzilla after we wrap this up. So I'm going to go.
Are you going
see
today?
it. Yeah, probably.
Are you going to go? Yeah.
Yeah, most likely.
Good.
I can't hold
Good.
it in anymore. Especially all the great things. Like, I'm going to go see it. You know, X was something I just saw the trailer for, and I knew I would love it. So, you know, it's just, there's so many other things, like even things I see get popular out in the server and stuff like that, and in the subreddit, I just don't care about, and I'm not going to. And then like superhero movies for the most part, you know, I just wait until, you know, the Black Friday deals hit HBO Max, whatever the case may be, and then I'll watch it then. You know, I don't need to go out there, spend all that time for something I know is going to be formulaic, whatever it's going to be. I'm going to go spend my time dedicated into an environment and a space for things that are going to be worth what I see as worth my time. You know, it's not going to be guaranteed for me to go to that. Otherwise, I'm going to take the convenience avenue. And like I had said earlier, that's an amazing shout out to that. Like you said, voting with your wallet. Barbie was a huge success. We have huge dedicated fans on the server that still talk about both of them. You know, Oppenheimer being like the biggest release of the year. Barbie, people couldn't wait for the release date to get their 4K copies, right? Yeah. Shout out to that 4K. I don't know if you guys have it yet. That 4K looks incredible, by the way.
I got it. It's on its way in. I should be getting it Tuesday. I think it's coming.
Yeah, it's
tomorrow or Tuesday.
Great transfer, great sound mixing, very well acted. Just you know, great for what you would think a Barbie movie would be, right? I kind of went into it lukewarm, kind of like Transformers. I'm a mega animated Transformers fan, and I'm not a huge fan of the films. So like when you hear something else like Toys to Life-esque, you know what I mean? Kind of cautious waters. But no, I think they took something, made it a movie about a product. You know what I mean? Instead of it being like, oh, here's the product, fight, 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 with not really much substance to it. That's not really going to hold up. I think Barbie's going to be something that kids are going to be watching for the next few generations. I don't think it's a perfect movie. I can understand why people see it as that way, but it's a phenomenal film, and I can't wait to watch Oppenheimer. I still haven't seen it.
I think Barbie has a pretty significant.
You haven't seen Oppenheimer yet?
Yeah, I gotta wait for that Steelbook to come in, my man. I knew you had that F1
how
already.
many times did you say mega during this? That's like you said mega. You keep saying that. What's going on?
I wonder where that's coming from.
I'm starting to get concerned. I'm wondering where that's.
Somebody from the Discord is probably getting me gave me the ick with it.
I was just going to say Barbie. I agree. I don't think Barbie's a perfect film. I liked Oppenheimer. Technically, I think Oppenheimer was better executed, but I think, Barbie, like, there's some very emotional scenes in there. You know, I think it has a very significant message, especially the ending. Like, that really, I think that's what resonated with a lot of people is that it's, you know, it's a movie about a toy, you know, like, generally speaking, and they were able to do something much more with it and make it significant and meaningful and really tell an interesting story. So, you know, I think that's why it caught on like it did. But there's a reason why I mentioned it as opposed to Oppenheimer, because as much as Oppenheimer is a fantastic movie, you know, Nolan is behind it, and he's kind of a household name at this point, you know. And again, I say this with utmost respect for Greta Gerwig. Like, I'm aware of her films. I've seen some of the other things that she's done, but she's not somebody that you mention her name and every average Joe is like, oh yeah, you know, Greta, big fan. You know, it's just not, she doesn't have that notoriety yet. And I'm hoping she will. And I wish her the utmost success. And I'm excited to see what else she does moving forward. But Barbie's just one of those examples with a director that isn't as well known. And a cast, I mean, Margot Robbie, like she's a household name. I think at this point she's getting there. You know, Ryan Gosling, obviously he's been in so many things, but as far as like director star power, so to speak, you know, that's a movie with a lesser director, you know, becoming successful. So obviously that's a fantastic thing too.
Yeah. And I don't think Wonka's coming out. I'm going to go see it. I just, Charlie and Chocolate Factory was at one point my favorite movie growing up. That was my favorite child's movie, I guess you could say, or family movie growing up. And I'm just curious if it's going to be bad, it's going to be bad. But that's probably something that's going to get me to go to theaters.
He said it's going to be bad.
Yeah. And honestly, it doesn't look good. But I mean, Timothée Chalamet is a fantastic actor.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
With a wide range of emotions, you know? So for him to want to do that, be signed on, you know, I feel like there's going to be something there. Because there's sometimes bad trailers, and I can appreciate a bad trailer because I don't watch them that much. But sometimes trailers are bad because they're hiding stuff. You know what I mean? And sometimes they're bad because
Right.
they're showing you, hopefully not, but sometimes they're showing you the good parts and it can still be bad.
The whole movie, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I'm excited for
So many
Wonka.
trailers are guilty of that, of showing you the like Halloween Kills. I know we keep talking about that movie, but that trailer just gave everything. Like, there's a lot of trailers that have been doing that, though. We need to go back to the days where trailers do just enough to entice you to pique your
Suspense.
curiosity.
Yeah.
And not give away the whole plot of the movie, you know?
I know I keep tooting Nolan's horn, but I like Nolan's trailers for sure, or the trailers they have for that, because it's just like when Tenet's trailer came out, you're like, what the fuck is this about?
Right.
See the
Well,
dude with
he
the
has a
mask,
heavy
like people were
hand in-
first, and you're like, what the hell's going on? And it doesn't describe the story at all. You're just intrigued.
But it catches your attention, and it caught, like, you know, when I saw that trailer, I was like, all right, well, let me look this up and see what the hell's going on here. I mean, it makes you want to look at them. And Nolan, I mean, he has a heavy hand in marketing, I believe, right? I'm assuming he does. I don't think that happens with every director, which would explain why, you know, some movies, the studios just, you know, do the marketing. They put someone else in charge of the trailers or however that works. And other times, like with Nolan, you can tell that, you know, they have a lot of influence over that kind of stuff. But
yeah. I don't know if we wanted to touch on, I know Chase is going to see it right now. Maybe hype him up with a quick take on Godzilla if we have time, like 5 minutes.
Yeah, Gabe, why don't you take off with that? I'll follow up what you have to say.
I mean, not much. I mean, I wrote the review the night of. I was just shocked that, at least in my opinion, looking at that movie, that it wasn't. I mean, it's a Godzilla movie, obviously, but at the same time, it's not. And I think that's why I liked it so much. Like Godzilla, kind of like the title, so the whole -1 thing. I think it's more really about like the Japanese people, like post World War II, and what they're going through to kind of rebuild and their identity, and you know, especially like the main character's identity after the war. And they focus really heavily on these characters, and Godzilla really is just kind of this force of nature that just kind of pops out. Even when you watch the movie, Chase, I think, I mean, I'm curious to see your take on it, but like, there's no like build up to Godzilla. It kind of just happens, and you're like, "Oh crap!" Like this is like it just happens. It's in your face. But like the main story revolves around these characters and like their own personal demons that they're kind of fighting. And I think that was interesting, because I was kind of walking in just expecting, like, you know, Godzilla versus the city. How do we stop them? Let's, you know, band together and stop them. And I thought that was going to be it. You get some of that, but I think the reason it works is just because the story is super emotional. I will not lie. I shed a tear at the end of the freaking movie, which was mind-boggling. And my brother was with me right next to me, and he was shedding a tear too. And I'm like, holy shit, like this is crazy. Super emotional movie. And I think, I mean, my only nitpick was like there was some moments where I felt like the editing, it just kind of cut too quickly. Like at the very end, I wish they kind of let that emotional moment kind of sink a little bit.
Play out a little bit more,
Play it. Yeah. But other than that, it's a fantastic movie. The special effects are amazing. I don't know if it was my theater, man. I was going to ask you, Will. The sound in that movie is freaking phenomenal. Like
sound is not, dude. I hope that they make that available on.
Oh my god,
disc.
dude!
I'm praying
best
that
sound I would say, like best sound I've seen all year. Like for theatrical. Yeah, I mean, Oppenheimer was dialogue heavy, so I don't know if I
heard that. I mean, like great sound mixing for a Nolan movie, because I know some of his, not to throw a dig, I just heard his sound mixing can be hit or miss at best sometimes.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely
in there, man.
He's gonna hit that escape button.
Escape. Disagree. No, I mean, Oppenheimer was great. It's more of a dialogue heavy film. I think like obviously like the nuke scene, you know, like that's a great scene. The music's incredible.
Test is really well done.
Yeah, Trinity Test is like goosebumps every time I watch it, man. I just the buildup is just so incredible. But like in terms of sound mixing in general, just like the stuff with Godzilla and like the guns and the ships, and just I'm like, man, and like when he uses his like fire breath, the way they do it is just so impactful. I'm kind of like what we talked about. It's a $15 million budget, and I'm like this. I'm sitting in the theater. I'm like, did they upgrade the sound system here, or is this just the movie? Because it just sounds so freaking. Yeah, I saw it standard. It was
no
a standard
elevated experience.
Okay. Nothing.
Okay.
But I was just like looking around, and I'm like, holy crap, this sound is amazing. But I mean, technically, fucking high merits. The story is incredible. The characters are incredible. It's honestly, I think it's for sure. I got to go through my list for the year, but I'm sure it's worked its way into the top 5 for me of the year. Super surprised with the movie. I loved it.
Nice.
What about you, Will? I read your review. You liked it a lot too.
I loved it. Yeah, I mean, I gave it 4.5 stars. I mean, Letterboxd reviews for me. I try to rate movies on a technical level, and then
Mhm.
whether or not I love them or not, I just do the heart on Letterboxd. Because
Yeah.
people get confused if they're like, "Well, you only gave it 3 stars, but you love it." I'm like, "Well, yeah, because I just love the movie personally,
Mhm.
but technically, like I rated it how I did." But and I gave it 4.5 because yeah, there were some editing choices that didn't really. They just were off with me.
Yeah, it's a little off-putting.
They didn't work for me. So that's the only reason. But I mean, everything else, dude, the sound mixing is probably the biggest thing that I can say. That's why I can't wait. And I'm hoping they release this on
4K
like a 4K or
Atmos.
something. And like, just because the sound mixing, I cannot wait to hear that, like, with my setup.
Mhm.
Top notch, just unbelievable job. I saw it in standard as well, just regular theater. But yeah, the acting is incredible. There's not much more I can say about the acting and the story and the character work, Gabe. I mean, you pretty much said everything that my thoughts align with that. I just think the action scenes when they happen, like when Godzilla does show up, they're so much more powerful because of the intimate story that we get in between those sequences, right?
Mhm.
And it really gives you time to kind of marinate with these characters and what they're going through. And it's just, dude, it's just such a tragic story. I mean, when I knew it was going to be set in post-war Japan, it's like, okay, they're
Yeah.
really hearkening back to the message of the original with that. And I remember that being a very somber take on what the Japanese people were going through, but they just make it so personal to a point where it really gets under your skin. And what I mean by that is you marinate with these characters leading up to these action sequences. And I don't want to give too much away, but I was kind of telling you this, Chase, before we started here. There's one scene in particular that to me is just really it just floored me. Was when I think it's the attack in I don't know if it's Ginza. I think it's Tokyo.
Mhm.
When Godzilla shows up in Tokyo, and there's an atomic breath scene that it is just horrifying, and it's because of the emotional built up and the emotion that you have invested with these characters, and just seeing what they're going through,
Mhm.
and just how ruthless Godzilla is. You
Yeah.
just feel horrible. You just feel hard, and that a Godzilla movie has never made me feel that way. I'm so used to, and I said this in my review. This is far superior, and no disrespect to the MonsterVerse and what they're doing. Like, I think those movies have their place. They're fun popcorn movies. If you want to just see Godzilla and Kong, duke it out, like in Godzilla versus Kong, or even the 2014 Godzilla, I really appreciate Gareth Edwards as a director.
Mhm.
I like those movies. Those movies are very entertaining. They're fun. I can throw them on, like you were saying. Just put them on. Do whatever I need to do. I have them in the background. They're just fun to watch. They look great on my TV, on my OLED. But this movie, just in terms of the story and the character work, and because of that, because you have that character work and the story that it's so well executed, and there's so much emotion tied into everything. The big battle scenes, they have that much more of an impact on you, right? And for me, it wasn't even like, wow, this is amazing to see. It's like, for me, it was just, God, this is horrifying. Like, you feel like one of those people trying to run and escape what you're seeing, because it's that well done. When Godzilla shows up, he is just, I said it in my review, he's just merciless. And there was some moments where I was just amazed. I was like, I can't believe they're like showing some of this, because it's not like hyper violent, like really brutal, but it's violent enough. It's like, I'd say it's more violent than anything I've seen out of the MonsterVerse films in terms of some of the things that they show. Just the way that he tramples through the city and just
Was it
flinging cars
PG-13
and
or R?
I don't know. That's a good
I
question,
didn't look
Gabe.
that up.
I never even thought of it, to be honest. It never crossed my
But it
mind.
does push that. Like, I mean, I could see it being an R, but I could also see
I
like
can,
it definitely
yeah,
pushes those limits.
PG-13.
it
PG-13. Holy
PG-13,
crap!
but
Yeah,
I mean, dude,
it
for
definitely pushes the
PG-13,
PG. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why I said in my review, it goes to those dark places. And I don't mean that it's like super violent, like not like it's bloody or anything, but there are some scenes that are just visually, it's like, oh my God, like
Yeah. No
you
one
just
is
have
safe
to.
too. Like that's the
No
scary
one is
part.
safe.
It's like
No one is safe.
it's not like your standard of like, okay, like mentally you're like, these are the good guys, these guys are gonna survive through the whole movie. It's like literally the whole time you're like, fuck. Like
Yeah,
anyone is expendable here. And I think
Yeah.
that's why you kind of on the edge of your
but
seat the
dude,
whole time.
that and it kind of plays into that feeling of hopelessness that the characters have, and that's why I felt so
Mhm.
I like felt so connected to them. I was like, no, I can't. I don't want. I know what's going to happen, and I don't want my eyes to see this, because it's horrible. It's just horrifying. It's horrifying, but I mean, and I don't
horrifying.
mean that in a bad way. It is very well done the way that they were able to convey that, and that atomic breath scene in the city, dude. Holy
So
hell,
dope.
Where does it fall? Does it fall in your top 5?
floored
Will?
me. I got to remember what else I have on my list. I got to go through everything. Yeah, I'd say it's definitely in my top 5. I think it's part of the reason why I just never expected a Godzilla movie to be
That good.
I never expected to be speaking about a Godzilla film in this way because of, we're so used to what we've been getting,
Yeah.
out of Hollywood in their recent incarnation. We kind of we're taking what we have from those films. I went into this with a certain mindset, and that was completely shattered. So in the best way possible. So,
and you didn't see Shin Godzilla, right? Because I heard good things about that one.
I didn't see Shin Godzilla, but I did a little research on Shin before I walked into this one, and Shin Godzilla definitely has its fans, but I was reading that people really appreciated this one more in terms of the realism and just how much farther they took things in terms of like how, in terms of how Godzilla scenes, in terms of how it's interlaid with what's actually happening in the story. Whereas Shin Godzilla was a little more, I guess we can say, elevated in terms of some of the fantastical elements to it.
Yeah.
Whereas this one was much more grounded, which, I mean, it really resonated with me. I appreciate that. So yeah, definitely. I'd say, it's definitely a contender for my top 5. We'll wait until we do that episode to see where it ends up. But yeah, it's definitely up there.
Okay. And before we end up closing out, let me ask you this for the people that are, I don't know, you guys probably are going to bully some of the audience into going to go see it like you guys did me. So this one is brand new. It is completely independent. You don't need any prior knowledge. This is the first in its own standalone, right? So you can
this
take
is
this
the
for
start
what it
of
is.
a new storyline. Whatever where they're going to go with this, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. There is, I guess, not necessarily post credit, but I mean, there's some stuff at the end that raised a few eyebrows. So we'll see where they go with it. But yeah, I mean, definitely a movie that I would say, if you want to just see something that's just unexpected. I mean, now the reviews are out, so people are kind of getting a taste that it actually is. It's well made and it's getting rave reviews. But yeah, I mean, I'd say it's worth a trip to the theater if you're willing to make that. If you're willing to make that happen, definitely go check it out.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys got me stoked. I think mine's at like 220. So I'm stoked.
Cool.
I actually bought the tickets while we were recording, so.
Cool. Yeah, and if you guys want, I mean, we can, I don't know, not that we're plugging it, but maybe we can do like a post, like once you've seen it, we can do like a spoiler review if we have time. Sometime this week we can all get on and do like a quick 30-minute thing. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I'd be down. Because if you guys gave it 4.5, I'm gonna come in and say, man, this is the best movie I've seen since Mad Max.
I think
Fury
Gabe
Road.
gave it 5.
I gave it a 5, dude. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I mean,
6.
the editing was like to me, it was kind of, that was just me nitpicking at that point. I felt like the emotional resonance just overshadowed like any small nitpicks I had with it, that I just had to give it a 5. Like I was going to give it a 4.5, but I was like, fuck it, I'll give it a 5.
Nice. Well, I think that covers all bases for streaming to cinema to fiery, spicy iguanas.
Yeah. We did it. We covered everything.
I love it. Well, as always, everybody, I also wanted to give a very heartfelt special shout out to the entire audience. I know we do this at least every other episode, but the overwhelming support in the server, in the subreddit, everything in between, to the people I meet on the streets, just wanted to give a heartfelt thank you for your support from the podcast to the YouTube channel. Everything's been growing a lot faster. We've been motivated to, at first this started out where we were only going to do it twice a month. And, we just saw the support, the wants, what people wanted us to talk about and stuff like that. And, it's fun for us to do this. So we like doing it every week, and hopefully we keep delivering the product that you guys like ingesting. So thank you from the bottom and top of our hearts, our entire souls. Heartfelt gratitude from us to you. Thank you, audience.
Yep. Ditto.
Damn, it's hard to follow that up, man.
That's why I just said ditto.
Yeah, same.
Like and subscribe, guys.
Same.
Like and subscribe, people.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys. Take it easy.
Take it easy, everybody.